flew backward, straight into enemy fire. But he refused to leave anyone behind. This is the story of the Angel of Dustoff. Bullets don't care how old you are. That's the only fact that matters at this altitude, in this cockpit, on this particular afternoon in October 1969. And the man flying this helicopter backward into a wall of enemy fire, no weapons, no escort, tail first, at treetop height, is 48 years old. Old enough to be the father of every other pilot in this valley today. Old enough that nobody would have blinked if he'd stayed home. He didn't stay home 6 times already. This same stretch of jungle has driven him out. 6 times he's turned the aircraft around and gone straight back in. Below him, one wounded man is lying close enough to an enemy bunker that any approach but this one gets everyone aboard killed. Chief Warrant Officer Michael Novosel holds the hover rock steady while rounds punch through the fuselage like hail on a tin roof and doesn't move the aircraft an inch off its line. He goes in anyway. To understand how a 48-year-old man ends up here, you have to go back almost 3 decades to a much younger Novosel and a very different aircraft. Etna, Pennsylvania, 1941. A recruiting office, a measuring stick. Novosel wants one thing badly enough: to walk in there at 19. He wants to fly. The Army Air Corps takes one look at the tape measure and turns him away. 5'4" is the minimum height for a cadet, and he comes up 1/4 of an inch short. Not his nerve, not his eyesight. 1/4 of an inch of bone stands between him and a cockpit. And the Army's answer is a pay clerk's desk. He doesn't sit at that desk for long. He tries again, gets turned away again. Somewhere along the way, he starts stretching every morning and every night, chasing 1/4 inch the way other men chase a promotion. Because if the only thing standing between him and a cockpit is a number on a tape measure, then the number is the thing he's going to beat. Stubbornness, persistence, whatever you want to call it. Novosel eventually talks his way past the measuring stick and into flight training. December 1942. Wings on his chest, a commission in his pocket, and a war waiting for him on the other side of an ocean. By 1945, he's over the Pacific in a B-29 Super Fortress, 4 engines, 30 tons of aircraft, flying combat missions out of Tİme in the final brutal push of the war against Japan. He drops bombs on an empire that's already losing, but hasn't admitted it yet. Then, when the guns finally go quiet, he flies the same aircraft on a very different kind of mission, dropping crates of food to Allied prisoners still locked behind wire in prison camps across Japan. Men who don't yet know their war is over, watching supplies fall out of a sky that had until recently only ever dropped something else. He's in the air above Tokyo Bay on the day the surrender is formally signed aboard the USS Missouri. 1 aircraft among 462 in a flyover built for exactly one purpose: to announce from the sky, in a way nobody on the ground could mistake, that it's finished. 23 years old. Wings. Combat time. A war won from the air. Most men would call that a life's worth of story and go home satisfied and spend the next 50 years telling it at dinner tables. There's a detail Novosel liked telling against himself decades later that says more about him than the medals ever could. A man who could hold a 30-ton bomber steady through anti-aircraft fire over the Pacific had never once, in all those years, learned to drive a car. Ask him to master a machine built to kill from 6 miles up, and he'd already done it by 23. Ask him to parallel park a sedan, and he needed a first sergeant standing beside him giving directions. The war that made his name is over. The one that will define his legacy hasn't started yet, and when it does, it will put him in a very different kind of aircraft, doing a very different kind of flying. Peace, for a career aviator, is its own quiet trap. Novosel could have ridden a reserve commission into a comfortable, forgettable retirement. Golf on weekends, a pension, a war story he told fewer and fewer times as the years went on. Instead, in his 40s, told that the Air Force's senior officer ranks were overcrowded and his services were, politely, no longer required at his level. He does something almost nobody does at that stage of a career. He doesn't fight the decision. He doesn't take the quiet exit either. He walks away from his own rank entirely. He trades a commissioned officer's seniority for a warrant officer's slot in the Army, a different branch, a lower position on paper, a demotion by any conventional measure, for one reason, and one reason only. It's the only door still open that leads back to a cockpit. Most men spend a career climbing rank. Novosel climbs back down it on purpose because the view from the top of a desk was never the view he wanted. That door leads straight to Vietnam and to a call sign that means something very specific by the mid-1960s. Dustoff, no door gunner, no armor plating, no gunship escort riding shotgun, just a Huey, a medic, a crew chief, and a mission that amounts, in the plainest possible terms, to flying toward the one place every other aircraft in the sky is actively trying to get away from. See, roughly 3,000 pilots and crew fly that mission across the length of the war. 1 in 3 of them becomes a casualty doing it. Numbers every man who signs up for Dustoff duty knows cold before he ever climbs into the cockpit for the first time. January to 1966, Novosel's first tour begins. He flies it, comes home, and then, in March of 1969, goes back for a second because whatever it was that made a man volunteer for this kind of flying, in the first place, apparently hadn't been satisfied by doing it once. Morning of the 2nd of October, 1969, Kien Tuong Province, deep in the Mekong Delta, close enough to the Cambodian border to taste it. A radio call comes in. A company of South Vietnamese soldiers surrounded with several thousand North Vietnamese light infantry closing the ring around them. Then, worse than the first call, silence. Radio contact with the trapped unit goes dead entirely. Their ammunition has run out. There is no way left for them to call for help, and nothing left in their hands to fight back with if help doesn't come in time. Novosel flies in anyway. No gunship cover, no fire support riding alongside him. Low over ground, thick with enemy troops, hunting for wounded men by eye alone, because the radios that should have been guiding him in have already gone silent for good. Below the aircraft, the ground tells its own story before a single shot is fired at him. Scattered equipment. Bodies that haven't moved in a while. Smoke still rising from something that was hit hours earlier. This is not a rescue mission dropping into a clean, contained battle. It's a mission dropping into whatever is left after a battle has already gone badly wrong for the men on the ground, with no clear line between where the fighting has stopped and where it's still happening. The first pass draws fire hard enough to drive him straight back out. He circles, goes in again, driven out again, circles once more. 6 times that valley throws the aircraft back. 6 times Novosel turns it around and flies straight back into exactly the fire that just repelled him. Every single pass runs on the same brutal physics. Skim in a treetop height, hold the hover rock steady while a medic and a crew chief lean bodily out into open air under fire and haul a wounded man aboard by whatever grip they can get. Get out again before the next burst finds the fuel cell. 1 man at a time. Sometimes 2, if the ground allows it. Then, back in for more. 15 separate extractions over roughly 2.5 continuous hours. An unarmed helicopter dropping into a killing field. Again and again, and climbing back out each time with someone alive who had no realistic chance of staying that way another 5 minutes. Inside the cabin, there's no room left for fear to matter. Tracer fire stitches up through the canopy overhead. The medic's hands are slick with someone else's blood. gripping a stranger's collar and hauling with everything his body is left, while the aircraft bucks and shudders in ground effect. Novosel's eyes never stop moving. Instrument panel, tree line, the next patch of open ground, the tree line again. Because the half-second it takes a human mind to process real fear is a half-second this aircraft cannot spare. Nobody speaks beyond what the mission requires. There isn't space in that cockpit for anything except the next set of coordinates and the next wounded man, still lying out there in the open, waiting on a helicopter that keeps coming back, no matter how many times the jungle tries to make sure it doesn't. Then comes the extraction that very nearly ends all of it. One man left. He's lying close enough to an enemy bunker that there is exactly one approach that offers any chance at all of reaching him without getting everyone aboard killed. Backward, tail first, blind, holding the hover while automatic weapons fire rakes the fuselage from a bunker Novosel cannot even see to aim away from. The Huey takes hits hard enough to matter, metal tearing, warning lights flaring across the panel. Novosel takes one too. For one long, terrible second, the aircraft is no longer answering him. Nose dipping, rotor wash chewing at brush too close to the skids. The whole airframe fighting to go somewhere he hasn't told it to go. And then, somehow, it is his again. He lifts out. Wounded man aboard. Crew aboard. Himself, bleeding now, aboard as well. 29 men are alive at the end of that single afternoon who had absolutely no business still being alive by lunchtime. There's one more detail to this story, and it's the kind that sounds like something a screenwriter invented, until you check the record and find out it happened exactly as described. Novosel's son, Michael Novosel Jr., is flying Dustoff too, at the very same time, in the very same war. Same call sign. Same impossible job. Father and son, in the air over the same stretch of country, on the same kind of missions, in the same stretch of calendar. 7 days after Kiên Tuong Province, Michael Jr.'s helicopter goes down. His father flies the extraction. Sit with that for a second, because it deserves more than a passing mention. A man who has just lived through the single, most harrowing afternoon of an already extraordinary war record, hit by enemy fire, aircraft damaged, 29 strangers pulled out of a killing field, climbs back into a cockpit within the week, and flies straight back into danger. Not for a stranger this time, for his own son, on the ground somewhere in a country that has already tried very hard to kill the father once that same month. The White House. President Richard Nixon places the Medal of Honor around the neck of a 48-year-old warrant officer, making him the oldest soldier in the entire United States Army to receive the nation's highest award for valor during the whole of the Vietnam War. By the time that medal is pinned, the number attached to the man behind it has already grown almost too large to hold in the mind all at once. 2,543 total missions flown across 2 full combat tours. Close to 5,600 wounded men carried out of places no unarmed aircraft should reasonably have been able to reach and return from. Behind every single one of those numbers sits a version of that same afternoon in Kiên Tuong Province, a helicopter with no weapons aboard, flying toward the sound of gunfire instead of away from it, because somewhere below, a wounded man was waiting, and there was no one else coming. Novosel doesn't stop when the medal comes. He goes on to serve as chief test pilot for the Army's Golden Knights parachute demonstration team, keeps flying for years afterward, and eventually retires as the last World War II combat aviator still on active flying status anywhere in the entire United States Armed Forces. A career spanning more than 4 decades in the air, over 12,000 flying hours logged, 3 separate wars survived from the cockpit. The men who flew Dustoff missions beside him call him, without irony, the Dean of the Dustoff pilots. Fort Rucker, Alabama, the heart of Army aviation itself, renames its main thoroughfare Novosel Avenue while he is still alive to drive down it himself, an honor almost no serving soldier ever lives long enough to witness. Somewhere inside those 2,543 missions and those thousands of strangers carried out of the fire, there is one single week in October of 1969 that says everything about who this man was. A 48-year-old pilot backing an unarmed helicopter into a bunker's line of fire to save a soldier he had never met and would likely never see again. And then, 7 days later, flying straight back into the same war to bring his own son home. This is Michael Novosel, the Angel of Dustoff.